What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show. In case we haven't met, my name is Rad Burmeister. I'm joined by my brother Yanni Burmeister and the voice of God who is controlling the switches for our show, Richard Lellis. We are the founders of Unity Gym and the UMS, the Unified Movement System, where we get you moving pain-free so you can do more of the things you love and perform like an athlete. The show is, of course, brought to you by our UMS coaching app, where you can get coached by the three of us for $1.75 a day. We have a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you want to get started with it, you can just go to unitygym.com, click the link, check it out. And today we're doing a show on shoulder imbalances, instability, shoulder pain. I've just done a bunch of posts recently on our social channels that have had so many questions that inspired this show because people really sort of feel like their issues that they're going through with their shoulders are really unique to them. And the truth is, Yanni and I have been coaches for almost 20 years now, Richard almost 10 years. We've worked with exceptional sports physiotherapists and practitioners that are leaders in their field to develop the UMS, the Unified Movement System, the program that we teach. So we've got a lot of skin in the game. And the truth is that most people's shoulder pain, most people's shoulder dysfunction is not as unique as what you might think it is. And it can be solved with a much simpler strategy than what a lot of people would think. And that's what we're going to go through today, because the questions that we have were all around, how do you know if you have shoulder imbalances? And in a nutshell, the way we bulletproof shoulders is with three things. It's number one, to create a balance between the inner unit and the outer unit. Inner unit being muscles like the deeper muscles that stabilize the shoulder joint, like the scapula stabilizers in the rotator cuff. Outer unit being more of the prime movers, like the pecs, lats, deltoids, biceps, and triceps. That's point number one, balance between inner unit and outer unit. Point number two, structural balance. Structural balance from left side to right side, from pushing and pulling, agonist and antagonist muscles. And then point number three is a balance between strength and flexibility. When you get these three things in check, most shoulder pain issues become a thing of the past. We know this through personal experience from having created Bulletproof Shoulders in hundreds and thousands of tribe members around the world, but also in ourselves. Yanni and I both had slap tears and terrible, torn rotator cuffs, terrible injuries in our shoulders that we've been able to overcome using these strategies. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And more importantly, the balance between the inner unit and the outer unit. I'm going to talk about that because that's where the questions have come from. So we had a bunch of questions which were all related to, how do I know if I've got an imbalance between the inner unit and the outer unit? And I'll just start by saying there is a test that you can do that we use in our much more advanced UMS students and that we teach to practitioners and also to personal trainers. And it basically talks about there's ratios that the external rotation from the knee wants to be in relation to your bench press, and same with the trap three raise, the bent over 45-degree trap three raise. And you want them to be about 12% of what your bench press is. But the problem is you can only get an accurate test with very strict testing parameters that the average person is incapable of recreating on themselves. So a much better way to do it is just to have a program that takes care of it through the programming. And that's what we've done with the UMS. So the way we do it with the UMS, and I'll throw this over to Yanni now, is we basically have created a program where within our upper body bent arm strength workouts that we do on Monday and Thursday, and our straight arm scapular strength workout that we do on Wednesday, we balance one-to-one pushing and pulling. So you're always getting that balance between the prime movers. And then we also balance inner unit and outer unit training by doing enough outer unit training that we build strength in those prime movers, pushing and pulling. But then we also do inner unit training in the supplementary circuit. And when you do that, you will notice what imbalances you have. For example, when you're doing the seated external rotation from the knee, you'll be able to tell if you've got an imbalance from your left side to your right side, because you'll be able to do 10 pounds for 10 reps on your stronger side, but you'll barely be able to do 4 or 5 pounds on the weaker side. You'll see the imbalance straight away. But the imbalances will also get taken care of just from doing the training. So, yeah, I'll throw it over to you, Yanni, so I don't just keep talking. I could talk about this with a mouthful of marbles and my head underwater, but I won't just talk for the whole
I was wondering
show.
if I was ever going to get a word in. Yeah, look, so Rad's given you essentially the context, the summary, and the answers in the intro. But now I want to talk a little bit about why. I guess we need to sort of understand like to understand why we use those movements to do the tests and why we should be combining those movements in a well-structured program. It's important to understand how the shoulder works, and also maybe we can build a little context around why most shoulder injuries or problems occur. Obviously, the theme of the show is how do I know whether I have an imbalance in the shoulder? Most of the time, unfortunately, you find out by achieving some level of pain or injury, arriving at a state of compromised shoulder injury, and that can be as small and benign as an overuse, sort of an inflamed rotator cuff tendon, or as catastrophic and serious as a slap tear, or a labrum tear, or a rotator cuff tendon tear. And we hope that you don't get that far. We hope that it starts. Sorry, I've got my kids here, and they're last day of school holidays. So if you hear them in the background, I do apologise. I it usually starts with a little bit of discomfort and pain, and it's often when you lift your hands over your head. I'm sure some of you can relate. And most of the time, you'll be diagnosed with some sort of an impingement problem, which is just the way the biomechanics of the shoulder operate. If you have some sort of a compromise going on in there, one of the tendons will get squeezed or squashed or agitated, and you've got a very complex brachioradial nerve stem that runs right through the shoulder from the chest and the neck. And you're going to feel it, and it can feel and refer pain all over the place. So sometimes what you experience isn't always directly correlated with where the issue is. But that's generally how you'll know that there's an imbalance. The other way that you'll know that there's an imbalance is if you have a strength plateau. And a strength plateau will usually occur in the big movements like the pushing or pulling. So think bench press, overhead press, or chin up or bent over row, because the body it tends to be, and we hope it is, because it's a safety mechanism, restrictive if there's a big structural imbalance there, because deep down our subconscious knows that we're at risk of creating some sort of a problem, an injury that's far greater than just a performance strength performance plateau. So it will tend to stop you from pushing further and further, adding more and more weight to your lifts if you are not functioning properly. So you'll either generally experience it through a discomfort sensation, a pain sensation, or just a frustration because you just don't seem to be able to add any more weight to your bench press. Those are the two most common ways that you'll know that you've got a structural imbalance. Of course, what Rad said there is if you want to be preemptive, you can do a number of different anatomical structural balance tests, and that will confirm it early on. But most people don't have the privilege of doing that. They'll generally stumble in one of those other two ways. Okay. Now, the reason why the movements that Rad talked about there are the testing, both the testing protocol and the ideal programming protocol, which is to offset your big pushing movements. So think overhead barbell military press and barbell bench press. Of course, you can interchange with dumbbells if you want. And the pulling movements. So think bent over row or seated row if you're using machines in the gym, or lat pull down or chin ups or pull up variations. The way we offset those movements is with two fairly simple and fairly easy to do exercises, which are external rotation in isolation and trap 3 raise in isolation. And the reason those two movements are so important and relevant here is that the shoulder is a uniquely versatile joint, unlike other joints in the body, like the knee, which really can only bend in one direction in that sagittal plane, and it's really built quite strong not to be able to bend sideways or twist or rotate. You have major problems if you do. And the hip, which can twist and rotate, but it's a lot deeper. It's a more robust socket, and a lot stronger. The shoulder is, often by physical therapists referred to like a golf ball in a golf tee. It's very shallow. And if you've ever played golf, if you don't put your tee straight in the ground, the ball won't sit in the socket. It just keeps falling off onto the ground, very frustratingly. That's kind of what the shoulder's like. And so we have these muscular systems that help keep it all in place. You've obviously got the big muscles on the outside that we know because we see in the mirror, like the pecs, the delts, the lats on the bottom. But then on the inside, we have this inner unit of muscles. And there's sort of two, I like to say there's two systems operating here. You've got the rotator cuff, which is four tendons, which create like a force coupling on the ball and socket to locate it in the joint and prevent what we refer to as joint glide. But then we have the scapular stabilizer system, which is muscles like the lower and mid trapezius, which are, of course, superficial, but stay with me anyway. And you've got your subscapularis. You've got your what are they called? The my God,
Supraspinatus and infraspinatus,
no, the serratus anterior. Sorry, I was getting caught up. That's the muscles that sort of
rhomboids.
pull it down onto the back. Anyway, I don't want to go into a Latin muscle assessment here, but really what you need to understand is you've got this stability system, scapular control system, and stability system. And the scapular control system is very important to understand because the scapula is basically half of your shoulder joint. That's your shoulder blade, makes up half of the shoulder joint. And unlike your pelvis that's sort of fixed in position, the shoulder blade moves around on the rib cage. So if you think about the logic of that, the shoulder by nature is a very unstable and vulnerable joint. And the way we create rigidity and strength and eliminate that vulnerability is we learn to set the scapula in place to create a solid foundation for the shoulder to operate in. So you'll hear, power lifters like our friend Sebastian Oram, Sebastian Oram from Australian Strength Coach, elite level power lifters who are teaching people how to optimize bench press. They'll often say you've got to set your shoulder blades into your back pockets and really hold them down and create rigidity. And if you don't learn to do that, then you have this unstable joint that when you load it up with a really heavy bench press creates major problems. Now, most shoulder, and this is what's most important, most shoulder injuries and pain come when you try to overload the joint, which we always do to build muscle or build strength. We have to overload the joint and do that gradually, just enough stimulus to get that response and not enough to hurt us. We overload the joint with a big heavy lift and we don't or are incapable of creating that rigidity. And there's movement in the joint that's unwanted movement. And so that's where these two specific exercises that Rad has talked about come in. The job of those two exercises is to remove or reduce any unwanted movement in the shoulder when you're lifting something heavy. And so remember going back to the two reasons why we how we know if we've got an imbalance. If you've got joint glide, meaning that the socket here is sliding around in the joint when you're trying to do a heavy bench press, the bones are going to be contacting and hitting structures that are not designed to take that amount of load. It could be the cartilage, it could be the tendons. And then also, if you can't keep, like, let's say when you go into and very commonly, I'm sure some of you can relate, when you go into a heavy pull up, your shoulders shrug. You can't fix the scapula down. And so the shoulders lift up and move around into awkward positions. What that's doing is it's creating a postural setup that is going to make it really difficult for the shoulder to flex and open up into that overhead position. And so you can see now why when we do these, like the trap 3 exercise, which is teaching us to be able to load and hold that shoulder blade in place, and we're doing the internal and external rotation exercises that are teaching the body how to locate the joint in it, the shoulder joint, so that it can go through that heavy lift without that joint glide, there's the slippage inside the joint. That's why those two movements, in their simplicity, are so important. Despite their simplicity, are so important, and that sort of builds a little bit of context around what Rad's talking about there. So, going back to what he said, you know, if you're a trainer coaching people, it's really good to be able to do these strength tests and these structural balance tests. But what we've found, if you're just a general pops trying to improve performance so that you can do more of the things you love pain free, you can get analysis paralysis when you go through these assessments. And we've actually found that it's just better to apply the same logic to your workouts. So going right back to the start of what Rad said, the three things that we want to do is we want to train in a way that promotes anatomical structural balance from left to right side. And the easiest way to do that is obviously with dumbbells, as well as using your barbells and your lat pull downs and stuff like that. You want to try to use neural pathways that are going to stimulate each individual limb with their own weight, with their own load. So one can't help out the other, if that makes sense. And for the lower extremity, that'll mean single leg squats, split squats, step ups, things like that to complement your big lifts like your squats. And then you want to train to promote structural balance between the inner and outer units. So we're stimulating those smaller, deeper stabilizer muscles to complement your big pressing and pulling muscles. And the same goes for the muscles in the hip joint as well. And then finally, you want to be training in a manner that promotes skill attribute symmetry or balance, which means in the most basic form, strength and flexibility. Because if you're not training to promote strength and flexibility, then usually you'll be promoting one of them and neglecting the other, and that generally always leads to problems down the track too. Rad, what do you have to add?
Well, I want to round this off. So there's something that I actually want to add to this. And Richie, I'd like you to please click on the most. I shared two links in the management channel in Slack. If you can click on the last one that I shared, which is the prone floor slide, and just bring that up while I'm talking about it. There's even a step before what Yanni said, like the external rotation from the knee, or sorry, the external rotation pattern and the trap three raise pattern. There's even a step before that that we work on, which is actually just learning to activate the scapular stabilizers. And we have a whole series of exercises that we use. This is actually the second one in progressive overload. So this is a really important concept to understand with everything that you do. You have to know which exercises you start with and then which ones build on that by becoming a little bit more challenging. This is the second exercise. It's called the prone floor slide. And the idea of this is that Richard is keeping his scapula depressed at all times while he's under control, slides his hands. As his hands go above his head, it becomes much harder to maintain that scapular depression. And so what we're looking for is constant time under tension, which is a really good way to train the central nervous system to learn to just activate these scapular stabilizers. And Richard, if you click on the other link that I got there,
Just quickly,
go to the
guys,
W.
scapular depression, Rad hasn't explained that, is pulling your shoulder blades down towards your back pockets.
Yeah, so that's what scapular depression is, pulling the shoulders down, okay? The W wall slide, this is a progression from the prone floor slide. This is harder to do. And so the idea of exercises like this is that it's teaching the central nervous system how to even just activate these muscles to do it properly. Now, the reason I wanted to show this is because I know, look, anybody that's gotten this far into the show, we're almost 20 minutes into a show, you're obviously really interested in this, okay? And I'm going to do a shameful plug at this point because Yanni and I spoke about this the other day. Yanni and I have spent almost 20 years developing the UMS. Richard's been a major part of that development for the last 10 years. We've learned from so many different people. And this concept of analysis paralysis that Yanni just said, this is so real and so important to understand. If you think about humanity, I'm going to go a little bit deep here. The reason why we are where we are in evolution is because we learned to outsource work. There was a time where we did everything for ourselves, everything. And that was a very inefficient way to live. And then agriculture became a part of society and we started to outsource work. We started to go to a blacksmith if we wanted to get metal work made for us. We went
Industrial
to,
Revolution,
you know,
baby.
yeah, that's right. And it was because of outsourcing that we were able to start jumping forward with evolution. And we're at this time now where people have forgotten that and people are spending a disproportionate amount of their time, searching YouTube, watching all these different videos, trying to understand this stuff. But it's great to get that knowledge and go, okay, wow, I understand. I've got to train the inner unit and the outer unit. These guys are giving me a couple of different exercises. I've got to do pushing and pulling. I've got to do strength and flexibility. But then how you put that all together in a workout that you actually get done and use periodization, that's a very, very different thing. And honestly, if you want to be really efficient and if you want to get real results, you've got to outsource. You've got to go to people that have done it before so that you don't have to think about it and you can apply your energy in the application of it, in the doing it. And I said this, it's a shameful plug. I've saved it to the end for those of you that have made it this far. That's what our UMS app is all about. And for less than $2 a day, you'll never have to think about this stuff again. So try it, click the link, go to unitygym.com. You'll get a free 30-day trial because you can get a money back guarantee in the first 30 days.
It's not a
And
free
if you're really
30-day
serious
trial.
about this,
That's incorrect advertising.
it's a
It's you
30-day
get
money back
charged, but
guarantee,
if you don't like it, you can get a refund.
which is essentially, yeah. Um, Honestly, try it, like there comes a point where all of this stuff, you're like, oh wow, that makes sense. But how do you do it? How do you actually do it in a way that makes your shoulders strong and capable so that you can do all these things that you want to do without this 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, injury cycle that people stay on. So
Yeah,
yeah, and we're going to do a bunch of videos on this topic because a lot of people have asked. And if you're not ready yet to get straight into the app, get the shoulder flex, get the bulletproof shoulder blueprint. I'll put a link. I'll put a comment here now that
put a
has
link in the
a link
description.
to that.
Just put a link in the description.
Yeah,
But yeah, look, I'll
put a
finish
link
on
in the
this note.
description.
And this is a lesson that took me a long time to learn, far too long, probably 2 decades too long to learn, which is that education without implementation is useless. Education, I'm writing a blog piece at the moment about this, education versus implementation. What's more important? And, I tend to find I've met many experts with the highest levels of education who never achieved noteworthy success in their field. And then I've met some extremely successful people in their field who, when you sit down and talk to them, you kind of go, this person's pretty dumb. Like they don't really know their shit. They're just incredible at implementing what they come up with, you know? And I'm not going to name any names, but there's a dozen people that come to mind that fall into that category that just seem to crush it. And the reason is because they implement, they're just so damn good at taking the little bits of information that they get and charging off with it and making and turning that into action. Um, and I think most of us fall somewhere in the middle there. We're just digesting content, education, education, education. And that's okay, but at some point, yeah, you do have to implement. Otherwise, it's all useless. Everything we teach on this channel is useless if you don't actually learn how to implement it. And that's kind of why I am so passionate and Rad's so passionate about our UMS app now, because the UMS app is all about teaching you guys how to implement the stuff that you learn from our channel and our social media platforms. And we've tried to make it in a way that is as affordable and cost effective as humanly possible for people. It's nowadays with the cost of inflation, it's about a quarter of the cost of a Starbucks coffee, maybe less, maybe a fifth of the cost of a Starbucks coffee. Coffee's about to go up even
In
more right now.
Australia, it's about the price of 2 or 3 lettuce leaves.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it really is it really is a great way to learn how to implement, guys. And I feel like we need to wrap this up because I'm getting more and more tanned by the minute. The sun's gone behind a building outside, and I had my lighting adjusted to, and I had some natural sunlight coming through my window, and I'm turning into the orange logo down the bottom there.
Yeah, but
Anyway,
look, check it
that's
out, guys, because all of this stuff's in there, and it's 60-minute workouts, like 60 minutes. There's a follow-along video and everything, and you'll get everything. You get periodized progressive overload every 4 weeks, and it'll do wonders. Like I've had a slap tear in both shoulders, like injuries that end people. And at age 44, I'm doing things now like calisthenics and acrobatic stuff that I couldn't do 10 years ago before I'd had slap tears. And it's all because of this stuff. It really works.
Now,
Cool.
last thing I'd like to say is if you did like that content, make sure you subscribe and click that little bell icon if you're on YouTube. And also consider just gently pressing the like button because it does help our channel grow. It helps get this
Gently. Don't
content
hit it
out
hard.
to,
That'll
no,
break the
just
channel. Do
gently,
it gently.
gently press. I just liked it. We've got a few people watching live. And if you do make it to the end, use that little like button. It does help us a little bit grow the channel and get the content in front of more people who need it. Take care. We'll
And if
see you
you came
tomorrow. Good
onto
to be
this
back.
live stream late, if you came onto the live stream late, you should go back and watch this because it's the best content you're going to see all day.
Have a great day, guys. See you later.
See you later, everyone.